My name is Ron Pelletier. I'm the founder of Pondurance. Started the company back in 2008. Would love to tell you more about it. You can visit us at the booth. And we can tell you a little bit more. I've been in the industry now for the longest time, I would say 20 years. But geez, doing the math now, I realize it's closer to 26, 27 years. So a lot of stuff is happening, a lot of good stuff I'm going to talk about. It's going to be fast fire. There's a lot of information I'm going to try to cover here in half an hour. So I'm assuming everyone here in the security industry or services it somehow. I guess let's get this out of the way. By a show of hands, how many people just absolutely hate it when the speaker says, hey, by a show of hands, show me this, right? Yes, I hate that too. So I'll just make assumptions the rest of the discussion here. But a lot of good stuff is happening, in cybersecurity. A lot of scary stuff. It's always been scary, I guess, but good to talk through anyway. And I always like to start the conversation with, why is this happening? Because people who aren't in the industry, even in, regular industry or whatever, they say, why is this always happening? Why is this happening? Because there's a lot of money in it, right? If you look at the cybersecurity problem that's projected to be here in 2025, something to the tune of $10.5 trillion. So yes, that is a lot of money. In fact, there's a statistic that if you were to monetize the dark web, component of it in terms of an economy, for instance, if you were to put a market cap on it, $8 trillion, that'd be the third largest economy in the world, right? So with that much money at stake, of course, there are going to be people drawn to it, unfortunately. So most of the motivations that we see among bad actors naturally span toward financial gain, something along these lines. Now, you've all seen lists like this or something like that. There's nothing really magic on here, but a couple of them are emerging even more and more. I mean, the street cred one's always an interesting problem, particularly if you're in, let's say, education, where you've got students that are on the network, and hopefully you've subnetted the production school network from the the student network or whatever, but because they have access to tools and things like that, they want to try it. Street cred, that's a real thing. Hacktivism is another thing. I've got a hacktivism story a little bit later. This is essentially for none of them political purposes, bringing political messaging to the forefront. But of course, all the rest of these on here, hold your data hostage, right? Ransomware, cryptojacking is something where you see, I think the price of Bitcoin now is something north of 113,000 right now. So when that goes up, what does that mean? More people want to get in the game because why? It takes a lot of processing power. It takes a lot of utility power to mine cryptocurrency. And so if they can do that without overhead, if they can get a slice here and there across 1,000 networks, well, that provides them a lucrative opportunity to do that. And so as you see the price of cryptocurrencies go up or move in that regard, then you see more instances of cryptojacking as well. So certainly state-based warfare is a big one, not on the list here, but this is just where most other industries are concerned. But certainly a lot of things that are at stake. So what are we seeing then from a cybersecurity perspective? What are some things to look at? Well, we run a big IR, incident response part of our business, and our folks are always on the forefront looking at things, responding to incidents, helping organizations to restore. And what we're constantly seeing more and more is vulnerability exploit. Nothing new, right? But for a while it seemed like business email compromise was king. And you know what? That's still a good delivery mechanism. But if I, as the attacker, can go straight to an endpoint or an edge device, and I can exploit that as a center of gravity. Let's say it's a middleware of some sort, then if I can get a foothold on there, then that's going to give me possibly a better in. And what we're seeing now are crazy numbers of CVEs that are being released out there now. I think even back in as this data shows, in 2024, 40,000, that was a large increase from years prior. Now we're looking at 56,000 plus CVEs that are projected to be released in 2025. Are all of them bad? Are all of them at the top? Not necessarily, but here's the caveat, okay, is that some that rate in the critical side, a 9.8, let's say, ostensibly you think, wow, this is something I got to fix immediately. But you can't ignore the 4-point scores, the mediums. If I can chain a few mediums together and I can get in and I can exploit something, that's still going to give me a path. So you can't just look at scores, you got to look at context. And that's why vulnerability management comes into play and is a big game changer as you incorporate that into your cybersecurity program. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But you can't just ignore the lower scores and say, I'm going to try to get everything that's at a high score or more. Data exfiltration. We're seeing a lot over encryption anymore. Before it used to be maybe they might take some data just to prove that they're in the environment, and of course the encryption that is effectuated and you're sitting in front of an encrypted computer is proof enough. But companies have gotten better at things like restoration or even the prevent side of malware, like encryption that's required to run encryption. Encryption's hard, as well for the bad actors. They have to manage keys now. If they're going to get paid, they have to be able to generally at least prove that they can decrypt, right? And we've seen cases where they've not been able to do that. But if they can prey on the hope that an organization might say, hey, look, we've got your data, here's proof of life, we're going to release this data to the masses if you don't pay the ransom. So what does that leave you with as an organization? Of course, it leaves you with a choice. Am I here to say either way, yes, pay the ransom or don't pay the ransom? That is an organizational decision. I'll leave it to government, law enforcement, and others to tell you never, ever do it. But when you're faced with that situation, well, you better have a good contingency plan, if you find yourself in that situation, particularly if you're locked up and you're not able to operate. So it's an organizational decision, but what we're seeing is folks want to get paid, right? If they say, hey, I got your data, I'm going to release it, and you want to try to prevent it from going public. And here's the thing, when you're in that situation too, and we deal with this a lot with some of our, the folks that we come in and rescue a lot of times in the middle of the night, what do? Do we want to save face? Should we negotiate with this bad actor? Again, an organizational decision. Now you got to know this is somebody who has really done bad things. Will they keep their word? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they want to maintain some kind of reputation so that if you do pay, then they don't release your data, or you find it not out there on the dark web somewhere that others will get the same message. It's kind of a convoluted concept, but anyway, that's certainly an organizational decision. But we're seeing more of that, just straight exfiltration, not even bothering with the encryption. Hacktivism, that's something. We have never been in a more polarized world than we are now. I think everybody might agree, with that. You've got both sides, we're like in the centrifuge and you're forced to almost pick a side because you're being spun over with all this news, ideas and things. And we're seeing that bleed over into the hacktivism space even more. Just last month, Columbia University had 1.6 terabytes of data stolen, something like 2.6 million records. And the actor released a message that their sole purpose was to determine whether or not Columbia was adhering to, or whether they were using affirmative action in their hiring or admittance processes, right? So pure hacktivism. You're seeing that more and more. And so is that for financial gain? Not necessarily, but because, again, it feels like we're being forced to choose sides in this crazy political world, we're seeing more and more of that come about. In my presentations, this is yours as much as it is mine. If you have a question, a point to make, we'll pause. We'll ask you to go ahead and speak up. I know that we are limited on time, but still, want to make sure that if you do have a question on a key point that you do make it. Let's talk also about time to, I have PWN here, but time to exploit. TTE is more the formal way to say that. It goes along the lines with what I said about vulnerability management and exploitation of vulnerabilities. But you remember back even a couple of years ago, it might have been 30 days if something did drop, a vulnerability dropped, and then it might have been up to 30 days before it might have been used more widely or against and weaponized in terms of trying to force exploitation of an organization for some gain. Now we're seeing it in as little as 48 hours. Why is that? Well, certainly the number of exploits, the tools that are available for exploits, right? And remember that $10.6 trillion bogey I told you that's hanging out there. Those are all motivators that are going to create organizations, bad actor organizations, to go ahead and try to effectuate their gains. Now, there's a lot of competition out there as well, among bad actors. You've seen more of them function like an organized crime entity. Some of them splinter either through law enforcement actions or politics, right? When the Ukraine and Russia war started up, those folks were working together in a lot of ways, but then they split into factions, and then now they're gaining a lot more stride. But there's a lot more of them that are now in the game. Identity is a dumpster fire, right? You hate to throw people under the bus where cybersecurity is concerned, but people can, in fact, be a weak link. Things like session hijacking, MFA fatigue, right? You get that constant, is this you logging in? Is this you logging in? And if you're not trained, if you're not disciplined, you just say, yeah, just it's probably me. It's probably me, from Cancun or from somewhere else, yeah, that's probably me. Let me go ahead and push and get this through. You see that more and more. People just want to be done, get the message out, clear their queue, and unfortunately, it's working favorably into the hands of bad actors, okay? Let's talk about AI for just a moment. Not quite the boogeyman on its own that it is, I think, repped to be. However, it is a threat multiplier. It is a tool that can be used in a very big way to further exploits, right? We're talking about, faster reconnaissance, using tools, using it across an automated basis, right? Try and do that with Google, right? You type in, hey, where are all the, X platforms that are out there? I won't name any products, but, it's a lot harder. You ask ChatGPT, oh yeah, well here's, all these and here's where they're at. And not only that, but there are regular scans of the internet that are occurring. It's not illegal to scan the external facing internet. It's done all of the time. And so being able to couple or aggregate and coalesce all that data, it provides a lot more reconnaissance, smarter phishing. If I can create phishing with better context, with spelling corrections eliminated, or even using tone for certain organizations, right? AI is great at doing that and can certainly formulate a message or a script or, certainly adaptive tooling where it's making changes to tools or to its code, on the fly, right? Everyone has maybe heard of endpoint detection response, right? Has been one of the greatest, I think, evolutions of security since antivirus, came out years ago, right? But whereas traditional legacy antivirus tools are more based on signatures, meaning that I have a piece of malware, here's an inoculation, and this inoculation can in fact knock it out, all right? Now you've got these next generation tools that can, in fact, use an algorithm to predict what the malware is going to do. And if I change one piece of that code, there's a good chance that the EDR tool will catch it. But if you can program AI to work against, that's why you constantly see tools like, which are still the top ones, Sentinel-1, CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, even the defenders coming more and more on scene as to doing a lot of that stuff. If I've got those in place, then I have reduced my opportunity for a malware exploitation somewhere in the tune of 94%. Back in the day it was 98%. Now it's continuing to drop, right? Because there are ways around it. People are ingenious. You build a wall, I'm going to get a bigger ladder, right? You put wire on that, I'm going to get a taller ladder. You do something else, I'm going to go under. People will find a way. That's one of the things proven in history, that people will ultimately try to circumvent any type of control. And if I can now use electronics, AI in this case, to try to help circumvent that, then again, a threat multiplier. So one other thing, supply chain under siege. We'll really talk about this from multiple standpoints, whether it's open source or you have to let a lot of people into your environment to help run it. That may not be in tune with what your security controls are. They may have their own way, or they might write into their master services agreements to say, hey, if I'm going to provide this service to you and I'm going to fix this within 24 hours or 8 hours, whatever the MSA suggests, then I need this type of access. And a lot of times it's admin access. And if you're willing to just give that in that light, then be prepared for a lot more opportunity, a lot more risk that can open up. So you have to be more discerning about how you leverage or how do you use administrative accounts for people that are into your environment. Make sure they're using your security controls. So when we look at program shortfalls, now I could probably list 10 slides, with some of these. These are just some I'm going to hit on quickly. And this is not to say, hey, we're all doing it wrong. We're all not good at security. This is just to say, here are some key things that we continue to see. Continuing with the thought about managed services provider, the supply chains, again, a lot of risk in there. A lot of organizations aren't considering that. They don't feel like, I don't feel comfortable that I'm going to audit this organization to make sure that they're doing the right things, when in fact you should always in your agreements make sure that you have a right to audit, or making sure that they're doing some sort of third-party audit, right? The SSA 18, not a great tool, for security. It's an audit methodology, not a security program, but it can at least be used to check certain things, access controls, change controls, things like that. But doing your own audits too in some way, surveys, even asking questionnaires, holding them to what they should be doing, whether it's a regulatory concern, whether it is meeting your own obligations or your customers. If you're a service provider too, I'd invite you to look at some of the contracts that you have and what you promise to your partners or your customers. And that can be enlightening too. There might be language in there that says you owe them notifications just for being scanned. Right? I've seen that a lot of times. And if you do that, well, be prepared to constantly write them and that we're being scanning, because they're probably getting scanned every day. So look at a lot of those things, both from the people that are servicing you and people whom you're servicing, so that you can take a look at contracts and make sure everything is right. This next line, it doesn't mean to be flippant about shiny tools with no or limited monitoring, but a lot of technology people tend to be tool collectors sometimes. Again, not trying to say that they don't know security, but one of the things that we'll see from a minimum control considerations on a later slide is that a lot of regulatory bodies are looking for specific security competencies within an organization to be compliant with a lot of regulatory mandates. But shiny tools, no limited monitoring, I think that there tends to be some over-engineering in security programs, because I feel like I need a tool for this. I got all these tools, but if I can't do anything with the data, if I can't aggregate, if I can't consolidate, if I can't use it in some way, it's a bunch of noise. It's creating more issues, more worries for me now. Now I have to deal with all this and try to sift through all of this stuff. So there's nothing wrong with technology. I encourage it all the time, right? In fact, that's what we do too. We make our tools stronger. We want to build it around the human. I always like to use having been in the military, a lot of military analogies about, like, we like to make the human stronger, just like the military does with the F-22 or the F-35 or the emerging exoskeleton suit, right? It's building it around a human. It's making the human stronger, but it's giving them a combative multiplier to be more effective. And that's what we're suggesting, certainly when you're bringing tools in, be able to wield that output for your benefit so you can make sense of it and do with your controls what you need to do. The other thing, IR, talk about incident response, the plans being too cumbersome. People want to, organizations have this big tome of steps, things. If this happens here, you can't organize every response, or you can't outline every response or plan for every response with a direct response. You have to have, if this happens, these are the actions I'm taking. Why? Because you want your incident response plan to be lightweight. And what I mean by that is it is perfectly situated to get the right people in the right room in the right time, to get the right information, to make the right decisions for the organization. It's being adaptive. Yes, put things in place to stop or prevent or channel issues from happening, but you have to make sure that you have that information to be able to make quick, rapid decisions. Think about resilience, and I'll talk about resilience a little bit more, but that's really the key idea now. It's not trying to prevent everything. You can't prevent everything. You just can't. But you have to put yourself in a position to be able to respond based on certain scenarios that might happen through your risk analysis, or if something does come up, and getting the right people to make quick decisions. I talked about over-engineering. I talked about AI a little bit, and making sure that you consider that in your risk-based program. Okay, again, there's a lot more speed, there's a lot more coverage that bad actors have as they try to effectuate their actions. And so making sure that you look at that from a risk perspective, and how can we use it as well? It can be both ways, but don't rely on it. Okay, so that's what you want to make sure that you do. And then getting to risk tolerance undefined. Now, the only thing I'm going to say about this slide, just to bypass it quickly, is we look at things as two spectrums, right? There's Swiss cheese, where Nothing's secured. And then there's Fort Knox, right? We'd never encourage you to be Fort Knox. You can't be Fort Knox. If you try to be Fort Knox where everything is air-gapped, everything is on a separate, nothing's connected, then you're not doing business. Not only that, you're an IT company now. You're not whatever industry that you normally are. You can't be Fort Knox. Don't strive to be there. However, you're somewhere in between. You have to be able to accept some level of risk if you're going to do business across the internet. But what you don't want to do is create paralysis or undue stoppages where it's going to, in fact, slow things down and make you less competitive. Not be Swiss cheese, though. You got to move up from that, but you got to find that sweet spot in between. And so what I like to talk about is be in a position of resilience. And so the old saying, and it was a military saying, right, that amateurs talk tactics where professionals talk and study logistics. Well, our view on cybersecurity, amateurs talk threats and controls, but cyber professionals strive for resilience. That's what you want to be. Things are going to happen. You put yourself in the best position you plan to avoid, but you have to be prepared to respond with the right actions, the right steps. You have the right people who are briefed in. Another one where I would ask a question, but I'll just say one of the things you want to do is make sure that if you have an incident response provider on retainer, that you run exercises with that incident response provider. You do not want 3 o'clock in the morning on a holiday weekend to be the first time you're introduced to your incident response organization or your law firm that's going to assist you, because then they're getting up to speed on, well, what's happening? Who are you? What do you do? What, is this? You want to bake them into your IR planning. You want them to be part of the exercises so that they already know what they're going to be doing if something does, in fact, happen. So again, striving for resilience, that's really the key. So as we look to things, minimum control considerations, I've got 2 slides here. Hopefully these slides will be available to everyone. You can distribute these. I won't go into each one of these, and certainly this is not an exhaustive list. If you've ever tried to apply for cyber insurance, which I'm sure most of you have, right, there are certainly it's gone from a couple of pages now to as many as 20 pages or certainly a number of questions that ask you about your cybersecurity posture. But I talked about qualified security competencies, making sure that a lot of organizations say, hey, we've got that one person, they are just a complete guru of anything technology, which is great. They make things run, but can they make things secure? Efficiently, not just secure in terms of, we lock everything down. Can I do it in the right way where not only does it meet compliance, which is a secondary thought, but it's in line with my risk assessment, within my risk tolerance. I know what I'm prepared to accept as risk, and then to be able to deal with it through incident response. But I've got a person who can see all that and bring that to the table. Inventory and asset management, of course, continuous risk management, multi-factor authentication. Yeah, that's been on there for a while now. And bad actors are finding more and more ways to get past that. But it's not a nice to have anymore. Try getting cyber insurance without saying that you put multi-factor in and a VPN connection. Even, we suggest, of course, internal connections where administrative controls or rights are at stake. Manage detection and response. Get a third party in there, somebody who does this on the daily. Yes, you can build your own SOC, and that's fine. If you're of size and organization, you want to hire 12 people on a full time so that they cover 24/7, then that's great. You have to make sure they're trained. You have to make sure you account for if they do leave, that you have a backfill. But using third parties can make sense in this case. And then using the right tools, not just SIM or things on your network, security management, but also endpoint detection and response, using some of these tools, but being able to channel it in to the right level of context so that you can, your provider or you as the organization, or better yet, in conjunction with, can make the best decisions and work together. Of course, we don't know have to probably go into a lot about the domain controller and the importance of that. So, you can look at these. I'll just hit one more thing on vulnerability management. A lot of organizations say, hey, we do our pen test on an annual basis. That's great. Doing a pen test is a great point-in-time exercise for today to say, here are my technical vulnerabilities, and I'm going to fix them. Let's say I do a pen test in January. By March, I think I've got all my, maybe my CVSS scores that are 4 and above, maybe I've got those remedied. Okay, I'm good, right? From March all the way until December of that year, that window of risk gets thrown wide open. Why? Because new vulnerabilities come out on the daily. there's a ton of people out there looking for them. Certainly the vendors, there are bounty hunters, there are the bad actors, there are nation states, there are a lot of people looking for vulnerabilities, and that's why we're seeing them increase. So staying vigilant with doing some sort of regular recurring scanning, and then of course taking action on a timely basis is of course the kicker to that. So those are all the important things. Now, here's something that I used to say that, hey, be good enough. All right, be better than the other organizations out there, and you'll probably be okay, because bad actors are opportunists. And so that old adage, if you and another person are running through the woods and you're both being chased by a bear, you don't have to outrun the bear, right? That used to be the thinking. Just outrun the other person, and the bear will get them, and you'll be fine. These days now, there's multiple bears out there, so the ratio has changed. So what does that consider? What does that do? There's a lot of bears out there. You can't just outrun the other person now. And I'm not suggesting the over-engineering is the way to go, but you have to look at risk. You have to look at what you're facing, because the chances are that you as being a target, if you don't consider all of the things that lead up to that, all the controls that are necessary, and maintaining a posture of resilience, you're going to find yourself in a different scenario. So yes, I think the game is changing. I think we do have to be more vigilant. I think we do have to pay more attention to risk analysis and looking at that on a more constant basis, not just a year where we have that third party that comes and says, okay, show me this, show me that, show me whatever. You have to be able to, in a position to look at things yourself, say, how are we moving? What's changed as our organization it evolves or adapts, and how do we need to change our security program with this? So again, just something to be aware of that is changing.